Hi, I'm making this video about how to help an emergency shelter. When there's a disaster, if you don't live too far from a shelter, you're probably scrambling in your mind, what can I do? What can I do? How can I help? So there are many things you can do. You can also help a community, and that's in my next video, in a different video. So this one is specifically about how to help a shelter. So emergency shelters have specific ways that they run and specific rules, and sometimes those rules are flexible and sometimes they are not. First of all, never do anything without talking to the shelter manager first. Run everything and anything by the shelter manager, whether it is you go in and talk to that person or whether you call that person. Do not just show up at a shelter with a whole bunch of stuff or a whole bunch of food thinking, yeah, we're going to go and we're going to help everybody, because what you could create is chaos and a fight. And you really don't want to do that. Do not show up at a shelter with 3 pairs of sparkly shoes to give to people, because you might have 50 little girls in there and 50 angry moms that so-and-so got shoes and their child didn't, and why didn't they, and why did they get them and my kid did not. And by doing that, you're not only wreaking havoc, you're also making targets out of those people that are receiving. So even if you think you're giving stuff to people in private, within a few days, everybody in the shelter feels like they need things, and they will notice everything new that comes into the shelter. So don't do that. First of all, people in a shelter usually have space for 1 cot and only a very small walking space around that cot as their space. So anything that you give them, they don't really have much room to store it. And if there's nowhere to lock it up, there's nowhere to keep it safe. If they can't use a washing machine, they can't use a microwave, they can't use bags and bags of clothing, because now they are burdened with all this stuff. And if they go eat, nobody's watching the stuff. If they go to the bathroom, nobody's watching the stuff. So now they're bound to the stuff. And that's another stress. And if they don't have a home to take it to, who knows when they're going to have a home to take it to, and who knows where that home may be. You know, maybe they're offered a great home in another place, but they can't take their stuff because they're going by bus. And it's just, no, it is not really helpful to them at this point. What people in a shelter need is they need food, immediate clothing, medical attention, and they need to get new homes. They need to get jobs. They need to get medical things taken care of, medications taken care of. They need communication with their families. Now, if you have jobs to offer people, you can call the shelter manager. If you want to get clothing to these people, usually people in shelters don't have way of doing laundry. So their socks and underwear get thrown away within so many days. So things like underwear, clean socks, for everyone, definitely for babies, disabled people, elderly people, is very useful, but that must go through the shelter manager. And that means you talking to the shelter manager, and only do so if you can get it for either an individual with a specific need that everyone in the shelter can realize that one person has that specific need. Because if not, that person will be a target by everybody else being angry. You don't want to do that to that person. If you have a company or a business or the ability to buy socks that are the same for everyone in the shelter, for sure the same for everyone in the shelter, then talk to the shelter manager and arrange it with them and make sure you get the sizes of everyone in the shelter. And then you can deliver it through either the shelter manager or as a gift. But you must do that through the shelter manager. You don't want to go in showing up with, random items for one person. If there's a specific person in that shelter that needs help that you can give, like for example, if you are Korean and there is a Korean refugee family or a family in there that does not speak English, maybe through the shelter manager, you can kind of symbolically adopt that family or that person and take that person out and help them in some way. Get them what they need, knowing that it's a specific situation that manager might not be able to give that person what they need, but you can. Maybe you have a licensed kitchen in your organization, your church, or your group, and you can cook meals or snacks or desserts. Run that through the shelter manager first. Do not just show up there with food. You can also offer to provide specific types of meals. Maybe there are people that only eat kosher, only eat halal. Maybe there are diabetic people or people with specific diets. Maybe you can provide those types of food for a shelter, but run that through the shelter manager first. Maybe you have a dance company. Maybe you have do plays or activities or games or challenge courses. I don't know. Some type of activity where you could come in with people that have already been screened in child safety, that can come in for an evening or an afternoon and do an event with the clients in a shelter to distract them and give them a good time for a little bit. But that has to go through the shelter manager. So don't burden the people with too much stuff. Call the shelter manager or talk to the shelter manager first about everything. And if you can give something, make sure you can do it for everyone. Call the shelter manager, and maybe the shelter manager and their staff are all from out of town and they don't know their area. And maybe a couple people in your group completely know the area. Maybe you can call them up and say, hey, we can be runners to restaurants. We know where all the restaurants are if you're ordering food or supplies. We can or do something where you can be the guide for the shelter manager and help them get around the community to get the things they need. Also, people might need baby supplies or supplies for disabled people. Call the shelter manager. Maybe they need baby wipes, baby pack and plays, baby strollers, diapers, baby food, formula. These are items, or same for with disabled people or elderly people. Call the shelter manager. Maybe you guys can supply that kind of thing. Okay, so those are some things that you can do to help an emergency shelter. Just don't show up there with lots of stuff. Sometimes shelters will have their own centers, distribution centers, and sometimes they do not. If they do, make sure you go through the distribution center. If they do not, find out where the distribution center is in the community, and take stuff to them so it can be distributed. If not, maybe you can start one if you're really good at collecting stuff and organizing it and all of that stuff. But then you're going to have to deal with it at some point. It's not easy to store Um, and yeah, it's a place where people can get very upset, very angry, very fast about somebody got something and they didn't. So it has to be handled in a very good, appropriate way, so that we can get everybody taken care of. Thank you very much. God bless.